out of the art cave, personal growth. To become a successful creative person, we need to understand our motivation and what we want to achieve as creative people. So as an artist, we are expressing ourselves and we're bringing our creation into the world, possibly to share with others, potentially as a way to invent something new, to create something that didn't exist in the world before. Now, where does that initial spark of creativity come from? That is a question that takes us back to the very origins of humankind. So we can rewind and we can go all the way back to that Neolithic cave. So we'll use this as our metaphor. Our lone human being in the cave, finding themselves compelled to pick up the materials around them and to draw something. Draw something from their imagination, from their mind's eye, and to make a physical representation and leave that behind on the cave wall. We can pick apart and unpack that initial creative drive, and we can use that to maybe better understand what our own motivations are. So personal goals are all about growth. And if we're trying to get somewhere, we're trying to progress or move forward, we're going from one place to another. So I love this allegory of the cave. You have to imagine that this is the student recounting what the teacher had said. And we have Plato recounting Socrates in the allegory of the cave. So we're given a description of the void, the blackness. Here you are as a creative person thinking about personal goals, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to completely erase everything. We're going to wipe the slate clean. Here we are in a black cave. There's no light, just pure darkness. And everything that we think we knew, we're calling into question. We know nothing. But we're able to use our senses, but we can't look around. It gets a little bit harsh, to say the least, when you actually read the allegory of the cave. We're imagining young prisoners, and their hands and feet are bound so that they cannot move. Their heads are bound so that they're fixed, looking forward at the back of the cave wall. So when we're looking at the back of the cave wall, there's going to be shadows and shapes, forms moving across. And so imagine these young men who've known nothing else but looking at this wall. Everything that they see flitter across that back of the cave wall. That's the only reality they've ever known. So they start naming the shapes. They start coming up with stories to go behind them. This is us. We are coming up with our descriptions and our understanding of reality based on a glimmer of the truth. Socrates goes on to explain that the philosopher is the one who has lifted their head, found some way to break the shackles, and finds out that it was all an illusion. That the light coming in from the mouth of the cave, that's what really brings light to the reality that we live in. So imagine these artists, that's us. We've just come to realize that we know nothing. Everything that we thought we knew was just a shadow. And the real source of light is outside of the cave. So that's where the metaphor really comes into play. So that is our art cave. The art cave is full of everything that we've built and the ideas that we've come up with to help us understand the outside world. It's kind of like your inner world. And as hard as you try to go out and explore outside of the cave, you're kind of always coming back to your own storehouse of ideas and symbols. And we're doing our best to communicate, right? So we're going to take a little time to slow down and think about each one of the aspects that might bring motivation to a creative person. Sometimes it's hard to know what the driving force behind your creative passion is. So you have to ask yourself some really basic questions. We'll stick with the cave metaphor here, and we'll think about the intentions of the person who's creating. We're in the cave, and we have that inspiration to create. And I touched upon the idea of communication. So that is a really key aspect of drawing and the creative arts in general. We're bringing an idea into reality. So this is this act of creation. I like to spend some time and really think about how important and impactful that is. Human civilization have used the tools around us, the technology you might say, to enhance our ability to communicate. Drawing is no different. Drawing is as fundamental to humans as writing or speech. And it's a visual language. So it all comes down to what we see with our eyes. How we interpret what we see with our eyes is going to vary from person to person. So that's why art is such a subjective experience. So as much as the artist has an intent for what they're trying to communicate, what the viewer actually takes away from that is completely up in the air. We're going to be playing off of the cultural icons and hoping that there is some sort of collective understanding. Drawing is a very universal language. It can tap into cross-cultural archetypes. These are symbols that carry over. Doesn't matter what culture you're coming from, you're going to understand those pictures. So here we are. We're in the cave. We're trying to use drawing and creating as a way to communicate with other people. Now, the passion to create. It seems like communicating with others is a very strong motivating factor. Creating artwork, if we're just imagining a stick of charcoal or some sort of rough paint, some sort of paste that could be applied to the wall, we're not going to be able to communicate a perfect image. We're going to have to simplify what we're trying to communicate, and we're going to use those basic forms and lines to help build up an artifact, an idea that we're trying to put forth. So if you think of your eye as the actual camera, that's taking the picture and recording a copy for your brain. So your best attempt at recreating that will always be a facsimile. It will always be an imitation of the real thing. Socrates and Plato, as philosophers, spent time thinking about our relationship with reality. The vast cosmos of space lie above us, and so we can find inspiration and we can look to the natural world to try and understand what is the order behind our existence. So the purpose of creating really gets down to that core understanding of oneself. Who am I? Why am I here? So when I ask a big, broad question like, why do we make art? Or more specifically, why do you make art? You're going to have a different answer. So I think the big part of that subjective nature of our experience is really tackled by art itself. We're able to give form to a shapeless idea, and we're able to communicate with that visual medium, something that people see with their eyes, and you can get a direct emotional response. The cave paintings that we've found have lasted for thousands of years. So outside of creating an individual experience, one person can observe the artwork that you've created and how you've used form, light, and shadow to draw forth an idea will elicit a different reaction from the viewer. Now, I don't think that the cave people had the intention of communicating with an audience thousands of years in the future. But there are definite examples where human beings have built monuments or written down huge important historical events. We can think about ways to measure time being built in monolithic structures. And the early humans were finding ways to keep a historical record. So even just as a simple way of keeping time and measuring the movement of our planet through the solar system by observing the apparent motion of the stars in the sky, we're tapping into that. Humans have found a way to leave a legacy. Once again, we could think back to another time, perhaps Italy during the Italian Renaissance. There's definitely a knowledge of the civilizations that had come in the past. And there was definitely an effort made to create a historical record. A lot of the artwork that we analyze when we look at Western history and art from around the world have to do with mythology and the beliefs of the people. So art is at that pivotal intersection between our beliefs and our curiosity to know more. When we're trying to come up with our own personal compass, something to guide us and give us direction, something to give us motivation along the way, when the journey of becoming an artist gets difficult, we can tap back into that source. That source is our understanding of our role in reality and our ability to understand. So us as one individual, we stand upon the shoulders of greatness. We're passing down ideas that have been given to us. The artist also has the courageous task of venturing inward and trying to come up with a new experience. It can be kind of a torment to be trying to come up with new experiences. I juxtapose that with the idea of leaving a mark. So you can be creating art because you want to leave your mark on the world. You want to influence others. If your goal is to influence other people, it can be to leave a lasting mark, something that's passed down through generations or from one person to another. But the end goal can be to create a single human moment. So the emotions and the reactions that people feel when they see this brand new cave painting that you've thrown up on the wall, it could be washed away by a flood or a storm. And then that one momentary experience that another individual had is all that's left. A fleeting memory, a thought, an emotion. So leaving a mark, that becomes a really big part of this. But your intention could be to just create a single moment. So people who are into theater, music, they are the experts at crafting those individual moments. If you're a content creator producing videos, you may not expect anyone to come by and watch your video again. You're trying to create a communication tool that they can enjoy once in that moment, benefit from it, hopefully, and then they can move on and take that with them. Compare that to a statue that's at the front of the building, that when you walk through the foyer, you see it every single time. This is like a craft that leaves a lasting experience. So we're builders, we're inventors, we're constantly trying to improve the human experience. And where we gain that knowledge is up to us. What are the things that we're looking out for? So I think as much as we're thinking of communication as using our voice and spreading our ideas in the world, one also has to be a good listener. So my one piece of advice for those wanting to progress and grow as a creative person is to become a better listener. And that can be your personal goal. Your personal goal can be to give yourself the freedom to explore and learn. I think it's good to give yourself time to be curious, ask those tough questions. And we're often told, oh, don't worry, there's no silly questions. It's important to not be shy and to be willing to ask something that seems incredibly obvious. Who am I? Why am I here? Why do I create art? Let's think about some of the other factors here. We've gone through the big one, which is communication. But there's also the aspect of wanting to become a master, to set your own personal goals in a way that helps you see the milestones so that you can chart your progress. If you're growing from a beginning artist and you'd like to be a professional, what does that mean, to be a professional? That might play more into the monetary side. How are you able to support yourself as an artist? I think we should separate that out from the simple quest of mastery. I immediately think of the monastic life. Those who cut out all distractions, they find the higher teachings and push themselves. They have a dedicated, lifelong pursuit to attaining something. There may not be a material financial reward for all these efforts. The only rewards are going to be internal. We're in that world where you can choose the monastic life. So sometimes going to the art cave can be a good thing. It's cutting yourself off from the world and living in your own isolated chamber of focus. But there are actual material needs. So even if you want to be the master artist and you're going to just work on making the perfect brushstroke, you're going to dip your pen into that ink, you're going to make a mark. That mark is always going to be an expression of your individual human experience. It sounds a little redundant, but it's worth noting that the hand of the artist is in everything you do. So part of that quest for mastery when it comes to drawing is repeating the stroke over and over, getting ultimate control, knowing where to let go of control so that you get that perfect stroke. Now, every brushstroke is going to be different. And anytime that you've perfected something, well, we know that you could do that exact same thing again. It would be slightly different. So there is no perfect. And if we really want to become successful, we need to know what we're trying to achieve. And I think it is good to look at the masters. And so when people talk about master studies, they're thinking about what it would be like to go into the museum and get to sit before the amazing painting that you love. And you get to sit by a master like Rembrandt and diligently try and copy the techniques and the process that they used. So there's looking at those masters of the past, but there's also just looking for mastery wherever you find it. So you don't have to be looking up to an artist aspiring to achieve their level of greatness, to have a mark that lasts for thousands of years. But you do need to challenge yourself to find out what motivates you. We can get into the philosophies of all the different art movements, and I think that it is important to understand art history. As an illustrator, working primarily on comic book style art, it is a road that's been walked down before. And so if we're trying to innovate and come up with something new, we have to really, really dig deep. This is why understanding your motivations can actually get you to question everything that you've done as a creative person. You've thought you had one purpose and one goal, and it turns out that that was a fleeting fool's errand, and you were just looking at it all wrong. So seeing the world, being a good listener, learning to observe the details comes with time. And we're constantly learning and unlearning, unpacking, relearning. That is part of being a creative person, and that's part of the human experience. It's our condition to be looking up at the stars out of our simple little cave and trying to come up with answers. So I think the communication aspect in telling a story is huge. And if you do want to influence the world with your ideas, you're going to have to find a way to fuel that creative mission. This is the material aspect. I don't think making money and being rich would be enough to sustain most artists. The challenges and the amount of time commitment probably balances out. So basically, if you're into an artistic career, you've already found a way to have a balance between the amount of money that you'll need in this capitalist society to survive and take care of your family. But for those who are still unable to find this balance, it really becomes something that you invest in. You're going to be putting out your money. You're going to be paying for the tools and the materials. And so at the very fundamental level, there's no getting around it. If your creative passion is not tied to the financial motivation, you're still going to have to find a way to come up with the paints and the supplies that you need for your particular creative field. That is a huge challenge. And I think that's why we need an episode like this in this series of videos, because coming out of the art cave is about finding some way to have balance. And as we're learning to draw from life, we're finding ways to overcome those obstacles and still give ourselves the creative freedom to really pursue the unknown. We're going to have to be willing to fail in order to succeed. There's a certain amount of risk and a real challenge to coming up with a sustainable art practice. So not just being able to fuel yourself, your mind, and your spirit so that you can get up and keep trying. You're going to also need ways to materially support yourself. Time. Time is the number one investment. So if you keep coming back to the same spot in the road and you're thinking, how do I make progress? How do I move forward? You have to understand that this is a challenge. You're going to have to balance your love of just making art for art's sake with your desire to have the time to do it. And so the more opportunities you can provide for yourself, the more free your mind is going to be to pursue the avenues of creation. You're always going to be having this balance. So you have to make it a constant quest to not only find the things that give you motivation and inspire you, but find the community that's going to help support you. We can call upon others who've had these same challenges. We can find those voices that speak to us and can give us the courage and dedication that we're going to need to get through this journey. If you're sending out your portfolio and you're not getting answers, that means you're already on that path. You're understanding what needs to be done, but you may need to make some revisions. So we're going to need each other to help give each other the feedback, that real-time response that can help guide us in the right direction. So coming out of the art cave is about shedding a little bit of light on that path. How do we get from a person with amazing ideas and some drawing skills and perfect that craft, hone those skills so that we're able to really express ourselves in the way that's in line with our motivation. Your motivation can be individual to you. You can pick up an art philosophy and start looking into what other artists have thought about creation and look at some of the products. We're also going to be looking at our influences and inspirations. These are the things that we pull out of the world and we use as a reference for the goals that we want to achieve. So knowing who you are is going to take knowing what you like. And how does what you enjoy looking at affect the art that you choose to make? We're going to talk about process and materials and that side quest that we're going to have to go on to find out what type of art we like to make. So this goes right along with finding our goals, is finding out what our influences are.